Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here and welcome to the channel. And welcome to another episode of My Collecting Life, the series where I get to speak to you, members of the toy collecting community, about your own personal collections, finding out what got you into collecting in the first place and what gives you that toy collecting buzz. Okay, so the big question on everybody's lips, who is today's guest? Well, why don't we find out? Let's take a look at some of his collection in a musical montage. Okay, so yet again, another fantastic collection, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to the channel John Rula, the action figure grader. Hello, sir.
Stu, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on, and it's just great to finally be on your channel.
Oh no, thank you for accepting the invite. I'm honoured to have you on the channel, mate. As you know, I support your channel and your Patreon, and a fantastic channel. A wealth of information there, so awesome stuff. Really good, good watching. Really enjoy watching.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your channel support, man. I'm amazed that anyone watches my garbage, but it's fun.
No,
it's fun. It keeps me out of trouble.
It's not garbage, man. I mean, no thanks to you. You're sending me down avenues that I never thought I would be exploring. So you're a big influence there. So
I hear, Stu, I hear that a lot. They're like,
yeah.
my wife is mad at me because I watch your channel and then I start buying stuff that I don't need. So now my wife's mad at me. So I do hear that a lot.
Well, listen, mine's the same. It's just like she goes, "Oh yeah, he sounds really cool. He sounds great." And I said, "Look what he's got me into." And she's like, So yeah. Anyway, let's crack on. I've got 10 questions for you,
Okay.
all about you and your collection. So it is all about you. So, like I say, run time's roughly about an hour. We can go over, not an issue. So we're cracking with the first question. What
Okay.
are your childhood memories, and what toy lines were you into?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually on my Instagram maybe 6 months ago, my brother was visiting my mom. This was, she's kind of has some health issues, and he found an old shoebox full of old photos from like my birthdays and Christmases, things like that. And I posted some of the old photos to my Instagram page, and it was just crazy to see some of the stuff that I had from my childhood. There's a great picture of me in my Christmas morning pajamas, ripping open and holding up a mint and sealed box, Optimus Prime Generation One. And I have very specific memories of my grandfather. Uh, Apparently, he told me after the fact he had to go to like 30 different toy stores all over, Richmond, Virginia area to try and find one of these because it was the hot toy of the year. It's probably 1983 or so. I don't remember exact what year, but I got this great photo of me holding it, and I still have that today. I still have that original Optimus Prime
Oh
that
wow.
my grandfather gave me, and he was a very important part of my life.
Yeah.
He was 16 years old when he lied about his age, and was at Pearl Harbor at 17 years old. I mean, just crazy. So to have that
Wow.
from my childhood is incredible.
Yeah.
Um, Masters of the Universe,
Yeah.
I definitely collected those. GI Joe, I had a lot of GI Joes, but obviously, Star Wars was my love and my number one love. So I just, I was born in '77.
Yeah.
So by the time it already kind of gone through the New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and I think towards the latter end of Empire Strikes Back and a lot of the Return of the Jedi figures, obviously those I was that's when I was coming along, was right at the start of Return of the Jedi. I have some old photos of my birthday one year, all these kids crowding around me, and I'm opening up some Return of the Jedi 48 backs, and they're all those things are valuable as hills now because they're transition
Yeah.
cards, and I've just got like a pile of them in front of me. So, so those are kind of some of
Wow.
my memories.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So I'm taking it then. So Star Wars was your predominant toy line. When you say you started collecting, you were at the age where it was like Return of the Jedi. Did you manage to get any of the earlier figures, like on the original cards, like figures from the Empire Strikes on the Empire Strikes Back card and Star Wars on the Star Wars card? Did you manage to get those, or were they sort of all on Return of the Jedi cards by the time you started collecting?
Yeah, so I was probably in 1983. I was 6 years old, so it was all just Return of the Jedi for the most part. I vaguely remember some clearance at some of the department stores near my house with some Empire Strikes Back cards. They were just getting them off the market to make room for the new Return of the Jedi line of figures. And I remember like very young. This is back when like HBO ruled the roost for video, and they had Empire Strikes Back very early on, and I was so excited. And those are some of my memories. But no, I never really had any of the really early card backs because it was just before my time. I was born in '77, so
Yeah.
um, Indiana Jones was another big one I really collected as a kid
Okay.
from the Raiders of the Lost Ark figures. I
Yeah.
begged my mom over and over again to take me to the stores to get some of those, but it was really just Star Wars, Transformers, and GI Joe. Those were the big three, the trifecta of my childhood, really.
Yeah. So, with Return of the Jedi, was you old enough to go and see it at the movies?
Oh yes, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw it
How was that
multiple
as an
times.
experience? How was that as it for the first time you saw it? What was that like as an experience?
I think that my biggest memory was the speeder bike scene. That
Yeah.
was just mind blowing to I've seen, I guess by this time I'd probably seen some of the Indiana Jones stuff and things like that. But something about that speeder bike scene was so mind blowing to me. And I think my parents took me to see it at least 3 times in the theater. It
Oh
was,
wow.
I mean, it was a big
Wow.
hit between me and my brother.
Yeah.
So that was an incredible experience.
Awesome. Because I know that they not excitable, but I mean I know they in America you appreciate things really like quite a bit, and they the atmosphere and stuff like that at the movies is totally different to what it is at the UK. We're kind of like more reserved. So I was like Return of the Jedi was the first movie that I managed to get to see at the movie, and I don't remember sort of like too much about it. There wasn't this big fanfare. I know there's a big toy display in the foyer, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got to look at this and stuff like that. So I remember getting a few toys after the movie, but I know with the States and you guys, there is a big fanfare and people do dress up and all that sort of stuff. And do you remember anything like that at all, or was it like that? Or
Oh yes, yeah. I
yeah,
remember going to the premiere of Return of the Jedi. The first day, and I remember there being stormtroopers and Darth Vader. And these were not like paid actors to promote the movie. These
yeah,
were
yeah,
people who were coming into the theater, and they were fully dressed in Darth Vader and stormtrooper stuff, and it was a big deal. And lots of cheers when Luke appeared for the first time in Jabba's palace, and
yeah.
the
Awesome.
I remember the death of the Emperor when I was watching it the first time, and all the cheers from the audience when he was thrown into
Wow,
the abyss by Vader.
wow.
It was pretty wild. I mean, I still have those memories. It's crazy.
It's like an event, isn't it? It's like an
It is
event. It really is.
even for like the Phantom Menace and some of those
Mm,
the re-releases, the
yeah,
THX re-releases of the original trilogy, and I guess by the Phantom Menace I was in college, and I remember that. I mean, we were on spring break in Myrtle Beach, and in between bouts of drunkenness, I remember going with my girlfriend, now wife at the time, to go see the Phantom Menace. Walking out of the theater disappointed, but I remember the crowd and all the crazy outfits and everything. It was
mm.
just fun times.
So what was it? What was it? What was it disappointing for you? What was it that disappointed you about the film?
I think, I mean, obviously the pod race scene was great, but I I, I think that the backstory that was necessary to build up to the Clone Wars, and kind of the separatists and all that. It took. I thought that the first movie was necessary, but it was just such boring kind of backstory for the most part
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the separatists and the blockades and Naboo and all that. But looking back at it now, and I think that you probably agree with me, and others would agree with me, that the prequel trilogy has, um, I would hope, aged well.
yeah.
It's aged a lot better than maybe some of the early criticisms it received. And for me
Oh yeah,
anyway, I mean, there's certainly bad acting and some bad lines and things like that, and some kind of groan worthy scenes. But I do think that it's an important backstory that
mm.
has grown on me.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, since other movies have been released, it's certainly gone up in my estimation. The prequel trilogies. Anyway,
Mhm.
moving on. Sorry, when did you become aware that you were a collector? Because you get to a
Oh,
certain age in childhood, don't you? And you stop playing with toys and you go and do sort of like grown up things that you think are grown up at the time, and you sort of forget about your toys. So when was it you realized you were back into it?
well, it was kind of embarrassing because I was pretty immature as a kid. I wasn't like the coolest kid in the world. I was kind of chubby, and I didn't have a lot of friends. And growing up, I was a very awkward child. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
And I definitely played or collected and kept Star Wars toys and other lines too, well past the appropriate age. So when I was like probably even in my teens, I still had and I still bought and I still kept pristine some of the of like the speeder bikes, for example. They were on clearance, and I was like probably, I don't know, 13. That's well past the time that most kids care about Star Wars toys. But I saw them on clearance for like, I mean, they were like $1, or I don't remember how much they were. It was just
yeah,
well past when the Star Wars line was, it was just overstock type stuff. And I found them for like $1, and I I bought 2 or 3 of them, and I was like, I'm not going to let these sit here for $1 at the store. So even back then, the ruminations were there, right? You know, I could tell that I still had an appreciation for these toys. And then when I got to college, or even like late high school, that's when the Power of the Force 2 line came out,
Okay,
and
yeah.
I was very embarrassed about going into Toys R Us. Nevertheless, I still bought like every single character they had, kept them mint on card. I opened up some of them, but I remember
Yeah.
being disappointed with them. You know, that they're too muscle bound.
Yeah.
But I remember. I mean, I still had at one point a Power of the Force 2 Boba Fett that I kept mint on card that I bought in high school. And, you know, what, 25 years later, I found it in my closet. So, you know, the early, you know, were
Yeah.
the early kind of beginnings and origin story of my collecting was there. And, but I didn't really get serious about collecting until probably about 2005, 2008-ish, somewhere in there.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So what was it that you started at the time? What was it that you started collecting? So like 2005, was it more Star Wars, or did you have a wider variety of lines that you sort of delved into?
Yeah, no, I had zero real collections, you know, other than just some minor comic book collections and stuff like that. And then I think it was around 2005, 2006, I walked into a Walmart and I was like, "Oh my gosh, they have 25th anniversary GI Joes," and they
Yeah.
instantly, you know, the memories flooded back. It was at a Walmart. I remember it. I still have it on my
Mm.
wall right now. It was a hooded Cobra Commander for like $3.88, and
Wow.
you know, it clearly had better articulation and paint apps and details and molds and everything. But I was like, this is unbelievable. They brought back GI Joe, and at that point, the floodgates were opened. Right, so I had to buy all the 25th anniversary GI Joes. I had to start going back and getting the mint on card vintage GI Joes, and it just literally. At one point, I had, I think, 85 original Hasbro 1980s and maybe early 90s mint on card GI Joes. They were all AFA graded, all high grade. I mean, it got really out of control really quickly.
Wow.
so
Wow.
so uh, and then kind of combined with that, maybe, you know, a few years later, I started thinking about, well, I really need to get back into Star Wars if I'm going to get serious about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was off to the races at that point.
So Star Wars, I guess, because you say you had was it GI Joe, Star Wars, and what was the other one? Master of the Universe or Transformers?
Masters of the Universe, yeah. When I
Master
was
of the
when I
Universe,
was a
yeah.
kid. Mm-hmm.
So they were your three main toy lines. Out of those three, what was your favorite and why?
And Transformers too. That was really the big
Oh,
four.
yeah,
You know, I would say that GI Joe probably took up the vast majority of my collecting,
yeah,
or of my childhood, only because Star Wars came out when I was about 6, right? 83,
yeah,
or Return of the Jedi came out about when I was about 6 years old. So really, it only had about a 2-year run there, you know, of where the toy line was in the stores until about 1985 or so.
yeah,
And so by then, GI Joe had kind of taken over, you know, with the cartoon and all of the early kind of Hasbro figures. And so I would say from 8 years old until 10, 11 ish, I was probably still, you know, I was really spending most of my time with GI Joe. But and so that's why when I saw it back in
mm,
'05, when they brought out the 25th anniversary, you know, that was my first kind of memory was some of those toys. But don't get me wrong, you know, I played quite a bit with Star Wars. It was, you know,
yeah.
Star Wars for a couple of years, and then GI Joe for probably more like 3 or 4 years, and they overlapped, obviously. So, um, but you know, really, I would say growing up, Star Wars and GI Joe. I would, you know, if you had to give me a pie chart, it was probably about 50-50, maybe
Yeah.
slightly more to GI Joe. So,
So did you? Because I really enjoyed GI Joe. I never had much of it myself. But like my friend had the majority of it, so I'd go around there at the weekends and we'd you know have big battles and do missions and stuff like that. But I found the earlier GI Joe stuff was the best. Like the I think it was it 1982 that came out? I think it was
somewhere in
1982.
there,
So
81,
from
82.
there up to about 1983, 1984, then they started getting with these really leery like costumes and stuff like that and uniforms, and I thought, yeah, not too keen on those. So I preferred the more military looking style figures as opposed to the more futuristic luminous coloured kind of like environment vipers or whatever you want to call them. I don't know, but so where did you collect up to? Did you collect the whole lot, or did you stop at a certain point?
No, yeah, it was really, the GI Joes kind of their heyday was until about probably, I'd say 87 or 88. And then right around 89 or so, 89 or 90 is when they started going over to like these Echo Warriors and,
That's it, Echo
the
Warriors.
Cobra Law and all these
Yeah.
kind of strange offshoots. And,
Yeah.
it was like the last kind of really good wave was like, Jinx and some of these other secondary characters, Fast Draw, things like that. And it was kind of the first one where the comics and the TV show really tied in together so closely, and that's how they mark. It was almost like the comics and the TV show were marketing materials basically for these
Yeah.
toys, and it was a really incredible line. But it was probably about 89 or 90 when they started getting a little weird with some of the bright pink
Yeah,
outfits and.
definitely. Yeah, it's a bit of an off-putter. So, you said you still got your Optimus Prime? Do you still have any other toys from your childhood at all, or
I've got a few. A lot of them got sold off when I was like in, yard sales and things like that. So I didn't have a ton. I have a couple of like Star Wars mini rigs and a Wampa and things like that, but not much of my childhood survived. Quite honestly, I mean, I got the B-wing. I've got the B-wing from my childhood. That's pretty pristine. But most of my childhood stuff is really kind of gone the way of the dodo.
So, yeah, likewise. I got most of mine. I'm still quite gutted about that, but hey, what can you do? So with GI Joe in the UK at the time, it was called Action Force. So we had all the GI Joe figures, but they're on the Action Force card backs, like the plain red and yellow stripe card. Do you have any of those carded?
I did. I had a few of them, not a lot of them, but I had some of the Action Force, some of the Japanese release Takaras. I had a few of those. I actually liked the Action Force specific kind of pre GI Joe figures. I couldn't tell you the name, like Red Skull or something. Like they had some like
the red Shadows, then you had Z
yes,
Force, SAS
yeah.
Force, yeah, Q Force.
I didn't have any of them, but I always coveted them. I wanted them so much when I'd see them on eBay. They were just such cool, anything kind of foreign. Some of the I had a few of the Brazilian examples, but most of my stuff was just the U.S. Hasbro cards. But I did build up quite a big Japanese Takara collection. I had probably maybe 7 or 8 of the mint on card Takara versions, and I just like the Japanese writing on them, things like that.
Yeah.
But
oh, awesome. So I've noticed in your collection you have, and on your videos, you have a hell of a lot of graded figures. What got you into graded figures, and why? And what was your first one?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I started getting really serious. I don't know when, but when I started buying some fairly expensive items, I discovered a number of YouTube channels, like the Blacked Out Ewoks, who you've had on the channel, and folks like him. But it was, just seeing some of the graded examples. And at this point, I'd already had a few, graded items. I'd already started sending stuff off to AFA to be graded. And I just enjoyed the authentication process and seeing what kind of grades I get and things like that. My first graded figure was a loose graded Darth Vader, because he's one of my favorite characters. And
original.
And the original, just the original Hong Kong Darth Vader, and it just kind of snowballed out of control to where I started looking at different COO, countries of origin, different variants, countries of manufacture, things like that. And I learned a lot just by watching BOE on YouTube, and then I just started getting more and more serious about it, and then modern items and vintage items, and next thing you know, pretty much my entire collection is all graded. I mean, I don't really have much in the way of loose figures that are not graded, and I don't know why. It's just a weird kind of OCD thing that it's just allowed me to kind of display them all and talk about the process. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what my channel is about, is just the authentication and grading process, the pros and cons of it, things like that. So
Yeah, no, I find it absolutely fascinating, and until I started watching your channel, I never even contemplated about getting a figure graded. The first figure I got graded, I got back, was the yak face from the sail barge. So I thought, well, he's, you know, you're not going to get him every day, so, or if you do, you're going to pay a fairly hefty price for him. So I thought, well, I'm going to get him graded. So I've done that. I've sent off the 2 carded figures that were with the Razor Crest. So I've sent them off. I'm still waiting for them.
great.
I've not sent off the Din Djarin one yet, the Mandalorian, the loose figure.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, well, I've got loads of vintage Star Wars figures, but the thing is with those, I don't want to send them off to get graded because I'm not 100% sure whether the weapons are genuine weapons that they came with. So, you know, I'm thinking, well, there's no point. So I had an old beat up carded Bosch, or Bausch, as you pronounce her. So I've sent that off to get graded, but I've said to them, can you please open it and then grade it as a loose figure? So they will actually be opening it and taking it off the card, then grading it as a loose figure. That way, I know, because it's been on the card and it's a beat up card, I know that the accessories are going to be genuine accessories. So I'm still waiting for them. And then obviously you now kindly sent me those comics, which are absolutely fantastic. So really appreciate that. Awesome stuff. And then what else did I send off? I sent off because I got in contact with you, didn't I, with those Topps cards, Star Wars Topps cards. So I'm still waiting for that initial Luke Skywalker to come back in his Stormtrooper.
Yeah, you got some good deals there on those vintage cards, and
Yeah.
you know, anytime you can pick up a Star Wars #1, you know, with Luke's rookie card, so to speak.
Yeah.
That batch you got was a great deal. I mean, it was a pretty fantastic deal.
I think it was 100. What did I say it was? Was it 130 in the end for both
30.
sets?
I think it was, yeah. Which was a bargain. I mean, that's a bargain deal.
Yeah. Because I remember seeing it and I'd like, well, I know I messaged you and you got back to me like do it, get him straight away. And I was like, okay, so I'd already gone back and got them by the time I got the message. But yeah, that was a fantastic find. So like I say, your channel is and you are very influential in those kind of things. And it's not in a bad way. I'm saying it as a compliment. So I'm paying you a compliment.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I get that comment a lot about like your videos make me want to start spending money, and that's probably the only negative about watching my channel, is that I just scroll through eBay constantly, and when I make these videos, it makes me want to buy stuff too. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle for the viewer as well as for me.
So not only is it figures that you've got graded, you've started. Well, you've also got a load of comics that are graded and trading cards. When did you get into collecting comics initially, and then when did you think, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start grading these as well as the trading cards?
Well, I just did it out of boredom, really. I just wanted to try something different, and so you know, a lot of the comic book market was on fire for about a year and a half, 2 years during, you know, lockdowns and things like that. And I thought it'd be fun to try and, you know, get comics pressed and pick out books that I thought would do well, and you know, and then just send them off to CGC to see how they grade and things like that. And I've had mixed success, some good batches, some bad batches, but that's part of the deal. Trading cards, same thing. I just wanted to try it out and see how well I could. You know, if you saw my last video where I had the return from PSA with those cards, they were all cards that I identified on eBay. They were, you know, not pack fresh, or they were not direct from a pack or anything. But I wanted to see how good my eye was with looking at a card and acquiring it, and then sending it off to be graded and see what kind of grades I can get. And I had really good success for that first one, really, and it just was kind of a fun test type thing. And that's to be honest with you, Stu. To be honest with you, you know, when I start grading comics or start grading trading cards, I really just do it for the channel, just to try it out. I just want to see how hard it is, and report to you guys my results, and how big of an idiot am I? You know, because I have times where I just look like an idiot, and then I have times where like that last PSA batch where I got 2 PSA Gem Mint 10s, and there's only been 20 on the entire series of cards that have ever hit that. You
Yeah,
know, so
that was unbelievable when you
it was
mentioned that.
lucky.
That was like, wow. Yeah.
Pure luck, pure luck. But you know, it's all just experiments because it's like, let's give it a try and see what happens. So
yeah, because I mean, I didn't know, you know, I kind of like, well, what do they grade these cards on? And then you sort of like mentioned about the centering and stuff like that. So now I've gone through the cards and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's over to the left a little bit more than the right, and then it's not centered properly. So I'm looking out for that. And then you say about the wear and tear around the edges and stuff like that. So of course I'm, you know, looking out for the wear and tear and stuff like that. But you said about comics being pressed. What do you mean by comics pressed? What is that?
yeah, so even like fresh comics that just came out like last week, because certain publishers, because of their either their shipping practices or the type of paper and inks they use, and Marvel is the best known example for this. They used really poor quality paper, and they used really poor quality inks for the manufacture of their comics. And if you want to get a high grade in a comic, so CGC 9.8 would be like a near mint plus to mint/mint grade. Probably what most people aim for with a brand new comic book. In order, your best chances of getting that, most people send those to what's called a presser and cleaner, and it's really just exactly as you'd imagine. They basically have a steam press where they take the first page and they use like some parchment paper below and above it, and then they press and clean out all the factory waviness and defects that you'll see from those comics. But even straight from the box from Diamond Distributors, I mean, those books can have so much wave. They can have spine roll. They can have rubbing from shipping inside the boxes and jostling around. So, I mean, you know, sometimes I'll order 5 of a comic book, brand new, very well protected, and they arrive. And of those 5, maybe 3 of them, at best, will be a 9.8 candidate. 2 of them, I can just look at them immediately and say, okay, that's got a spine tick, that's got too much color rub, that's got too much this or that, the other. And even with a press, it would be a waste of time. There's no way it will hit a 9.8 grade.
Right. So you get to know that over like through experience and through and like doing it over a certain amount of years. I guess it doesn't just come like natural. I mean, I guess when you first started doing it, you weren't too sure about what you were looking out for and stuff like that.
I still don't know what I'm doing that well, really. I mean, you know, the first time I sent off a batch of comics, I didn't press them. I didn't do anything. I just said, that looks pretty good. Let's see what happens, you know, and then I'll send them off to CGC, and I got really lucky. You know, I think like, you know, maybe 80% of them hit a 9.8 grade. And then I had this last batch of Mandalorian comics where I got them pressed and pristine. And I wrapped them so perfectly, and I did everything I possibly could to make sure that they were perfect comics. And then I only hit 16 out of 25 as a 9.8. So it's a complete shotgun approach, and sometimes I hit the target, sometimes I don't. But there's a lot of really good resources on the web and YouTube channels that go through what is a 9.8 versus a 9.6 grade. And the difference between a 9.8 grade comic book and a 9.6 grade comic book is so infinitesimally small. I mean, it could be one little 1/8 inch spine tick around the bind that can make that immediately a 9.6. So it's just very difficult to tell the difference sometimes, but sometimes I got it, sometimes I don't.
I mean, I remember the first comics I got, and I think it was when Bane broke Batman's Spider-Back, Bane broke Batman's back,
right,
and then Superman died. So that was the time that I got into comics. So I had all of those comics from issue 1 up to that sort of like point, and I don't know why I ended up selling them.
I found a big bin of my childhood comics, and it was just brought back so many memories. So a lot of those books that I remember from my childhood and reading and rereading, and I'd go back and find them on eBay, you know, and like there's a couple of Spider-Man books I really loved growing up. So I found those in like the best possible grade, and I was like, I gotta have that for my collection. So that's you know, part of it, and part of it's just it's like a piece of art, really, you know. They take up a lot less space than all the stuff behind me.
Yeah.
So there's just an art quality to a lot of comic books and trading cards that I really enjoy, and it's almost like an aesthetic type thing where I just want to have, kind of like what's behind you right now with some of the frames and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, these things here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they're just like little posters of all the Star Wars episodes that have been out. Like, so you've got like Clone Wars, Rebels, Rogue One, Solo, Resistance, and then the other side you've got like Andor and the Book of Boba Fett. So I just got those. They're just simple A3 posters. I thought they looked pretty cool, so that's why I got
Yeah,
those.
it's a similar thing, right? It's just some good art
Yeah.
to kind of appreciate, and that's kind of the way I look at it with comic books too.
Yeah. No, awesome. Because you say you've got 3 different grading companies where you are. What are the differences between the 3? So it's C. Is it CFC?
Well,
No.
for action figures, it's really just 2. We have
Okay.
Action Figure Authority and Collector Archive Services.
Okay. Yeah.
AFA is kind of like the Godfather, right? They're like they're like the emperor. They've been doing it the longest. They have the best known name, the best pedigree. Their items usually command the highest prices. And then CAS is probably the closest, I would say, with UKG. They're probably, they grade this the most similarly. I would say that in terms of pedigree, it goes AFA and then UKG, and then probably CAS would be third. But they're more of an up and coming company. They historically have been known for customization, a lot of custom acrylic cases, a lot of the like some of the weirder items in my collection, like older bootlegs and things like that, prototypes, stuff that AFA wouldn't touch. I can get a lot of cool custom items done with CAS, and but those are the big 2 in the US, and then obviously UKG where you are.
So have you heard of people from the UK actually sending stuff over to the States and getting it graded?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially if they got something custom, if they want something custom, they'll send it to CAS because, maybe UKG won't do it the way that they want it done. Or there's a lot of collectors that deal with very, very high end items that, for whatever reason, they just prefer AFA, or, or maybe they're going to have it graded by AFA and shipped right from AFA to the auction houses and auction them off, and they're going to stay in the US. So, but yeah, I know a lot of collectors that in the UK and Australia, all over the world, that will use AFA or CAS, just depending on what they have.
Cool, blimey. Okay, that's interesting to know. I didn't think you could do that. I wasn't aware that you could.
It's just the shipping cost. The shipping cost is what gets you.
That's a killer. That is sometimes. So, what other toy lines do you collect other than the Star Wars? And do you get them graded as well? Or is it just solely Star Wars figures that you grade, and comics, or do you have other figures that are graded from different toy lines?
I had to cut it off. Really, I did at one point have some other toy lines like, G.I. Joe and things like that. But really, my entire collection is now Star Wars. And I get my fix, so to speak, like superheroes or whatever it is that like Spider-Man, whatever. I get my fix from the comic side, right? So if there's something that I want that's superhero or other toy line related, I'd probably keep it to comic books. But in terms of my action figure collection, it's I've got a few G.I. Joes hanging up on the wall that are just for decoration. But the vast 99.9% of my collection is just Star Wars. So
and you saying about, I guess, is that the same with the comics as well? It's just Star Wars comics you collect, or do you
yeah. So that's why if I have like a Wolverine, for example, is one of my favorite superheroes. I don't want to start collecting Wolverine action figures just because I don't have the space for it. I get my Wolverine fix by picking out a Wolverine comic if I really like the cover on it, or maybe it's a key book, or I think it'll do really well long term. Like I have his Origins comic in a 9.8 grade. It's Marvel Comics Presents number 72. That's Wolverine's origin comic book, and that's kind of a key issue. And so I have that one, and that gives me my fix for whatever it is that's not Star Wars related. But even my comic book collection is I'd say 80% Star Wars related.
Wow. And is that because of like lack of space, or is it because of of funding, or is it both?
It's 100% because of space. I mean, I just don't have this. I've been acquiring so much stuff over the last, I'd say 15, 10 or 15 years that I just
Wow.
now I very rarely buy much anymore because I've either got stuff in grading, or I'm sending stuff off to grading, or it's just geography. I don't have the collection room geography to make even more stuff happen. So it's I might get one
Yeah.
item a month now at most.
Yeah, I think most people can sympathise there with the lack of space.
Mhm.
I think it's definitely a thorn in most collectors' sides for sure.
Mhm.
So, what made you decide to do a YouTube channel, and who were your influences? And when you started your influences, when you started your YouTube channel, did you have obviously you had the idea of going into looking on eBay and grading stuff. So was that something that you set out from the start, and why did you do that, and what made you do it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, most people who have watched my channel for a while know my backstory. It was about 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago this past Tuesday, where I
Okay.
decided to get sober. I was a pretty bad alcoholic, and now I still am an alcoholic, but at least I'm treated now, and I've been sober 6 years as of this past Tuesday. But I was just getting cleaned up, and I was trying to get my life back in order, and I didn't know what to do with my time because where I had been spending 8 or 10 hours a day drinking. Now I've got 8 or 10 hours where it's not being filled with drinking. So what do I do? So I was on YouTube, and I found some YouTube channels, most notably the Blacked Out Ewoks. I found a lot of his old videos about grading and about his graded collection. And I was like, well, I've got graded items. I could, maybe start showing some of it on YouTube. And if you go back and look at my very first video, it is so awkward and so stilted and disjointed and just very, very awkward. I just didn't have a
Yeah.
comfort level with sharing on camera. And it took a little while to kind of figure out my comfort level with this stuff. And that's how I started. I don't remember when. I think it was August of 2019 is when I started the channel. And so I just
2019?
started showing. Go ahead.
Did you say 2019?
I think so. I might have been 2018, maybe 2018.
Even still, it's not that long ago, is it? Wow. The way I perceive you, because I've not seen a lot of your earlier stuff, you come across as someone who seems very confident, very knowledgeable, and someone who's been doing it for 10, 15 plus years. That is what I initially thought when I first saw your channel. I'm absolutely astounded that it's only been a short amount of time that you've been doing the channel. So kudos to you, sir. You've done a fantastic job, mate. Honestly.
Oh, wow. Well, like I
Seriously.
said, if you go back and watch some of my earlier videos,
I
you'll
will.
understand that it's
I
very,
will.
very awkward. I didn't
Yeah.
really. I had no game plan in place. I had no overarching kind of theme to the channel. I just basically showed my stuff, showed whatever I had in my collection, or I showed what came back from the grading company. And I think with I took a kind of a break, at some point where I just didn't really film much during the kind of lockdowns, and I needed a way to film that did not require that I could record it during weird hours because we were in the middle of a kitchen renovation during all this stuff. So I started to come up with the idea, well, why don't I just show what's on eBay? Why don't I show prices of sold stuff on eBay? And that's when the channel really took off. I maybe had 700 or 800 subscribers. And then when I started doing kind of the eBay market updates, I kind of eased them into the channel just to see if people would like them. And it was a hit. People really liked them. And so I would say really, 80% of my channel now is just keeping people updated on prices and what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, what to look out for, things like that. And it helps me because I have a better idea of if I am going to buy something, what's the general price point of it? What's the value of it? And so I kind of weave in stuff, little knowledge tidbits about a certain country of origin, or this factory made this, or this figure has a scar CO, whatever it is you want to talk about. I kind of try to weave those into price updates. So it's not just regurgitating eBay prices. It's also, is this a good deal? is this what the seller says it is? What's unique about this item? What's rare about this item? And people just seem to like it, and I'm glad they do. I don't know why they do, but they
Oh
do.
yeah, it's great. I love it, and I've mentioned a couple of times. I'm so surprised at the amount of money people are willing to spend on certain items, whether it be a carded figure, or graded comic, and it is mind blowing, especially in this current climate we're living in. People are still finding the money to spend probably $1,000 plus on a card or a comic or a figure, and I just find that remarkable. I really do. I mean,
Well,
wow.
yeah, this is something I've really talked about on my channel a lot, and I think it was probably June or July of this year where I
Mm,
made the call. I said, I'm telling you right now, we are at a peak in collectibles prices, and you can expect from here for prices to start trickling downwards because of economic
yeah,
concern. And
yeah,
in my mind, I've been proven fairly correct on that because a lot of the later Hakes auctions, which deals in very high end items, a lot of
yeah,
those auction prices have disappointed. Are they still expensive? Absolutely. I mean, the rocket firing FET sold for $165,000, but you have to remember that just 6 months earlier, one sold for over 200,000 or whatever the number was. So,
yeah,
so prices are coming down, but there's always going to be a subset of high end collectors for this stuff, and I've got a video coming out tomorrow that previews the next Hakes auction lot that where bidding ends mid-November, and you will not believe some of these items. I mean, these are like one of one, the most ultra rare type of items, and I fully expect some of those prices to be just absolutely astronomical. But for the average collector like you and me, it's really
yeah,
just us on the outside looking in and seeing what the
yeah.
other, you know, 0.5% of the collecting community is willing to pay for this stuff.
It's crazy. It really is. I mean, they must have more money than sense. I mean, I guess you, like most other people, like most normal collectors, I would say, would you have a price cap on what you're willing to spend on a certain figure?
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I have a collecting budget. I mean, I've talked about this on my channel a lot. I keep a spreadsheet, right?
yeah,
If there's something I really want and I don't have the money for it, then I'm going to sell off some stuff, and uh, I've kind of entered a new phase of my collecting where I'm a little bit concerned about where the economics of not only the U.S. but globally speaking. I mean, there's a
mm,
lot of turmoil going on. You guys know that in the U.K. right now with
yeah, yeah,
everything that's going on with your government,
yeah,
currencies and things like that. So I've really kind of reeled my collecting budget way back in.
yeah,
Now, if we get back to maybe a normal economic boom type thing, then it'll as a result probably likely expand. But I'm very very conservative with where I spend my money, and if I do go after something that's I call it big boy money. If it's big
yeah,
boy money, then I've got to sell a lot of stuff to pay for it, and that's how I
yeah,
usually
yeah,
fund it.
fair enough.
So
Yeah, fair enough. I find what I find interesting as well is when I've seen a few of the vintage collection figures, especially from 1.0, and they, like that Ahsoka, I saw that on eBay at one point going for £600. And then what happens is a few months later, they start re-releasing these figures on the cards. That must have a big effect on the price of those original figures. Have you noticed that at all? Or
oh yes, yeah, I talk about this in my vintage collection market updates, and I think I've the video coming out later today. I talk about the Weequay, for example. Hasbro just announced that a lot of those Jabba's henchmen and skiff guards and things are going to get reissued. Well,
yeah,
guess what happened to the Weequay, right? The Weequay was going for $200 US, and now it's going for 100 and 150, and it'll probably go even further down from there. So I've felt the pain on those Ahsokas, right? Because I had
yeah,
I've got some of the original issues. I've got the U.S. card and the Canadian card, and the prices I paid either through trades or through straight cash. They were big money purchases. And how do you think some of those guys that paid $1,800 US for a graded original issue Ahsoka, which several did on Facebook. I mean, these were Facebook purchases I remember seeing. How do those guys feel now that price has dropped to less than half that number? So so it's a very real thing with those reissues, and I do think that while Hasbro is doing the right thing for their company in terms of, you know, they're in the business of making money, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah. I get that.
reissuing a Weequay or an Ahsoka makes them money, that they're going to do that. But I
Yeah.
do think that they run the risk of some of the longtime collectors maybe being leaving a bad taste in their mouth because of some of the prices they paid on the secondary market, right?
If you've got a figure that's on a 1.0 card and it's got all the information on the back, it's being graded and it's graded at a high mark, would that not hold its price?
Well, it's a good question. I think with a certain subset of collectors, it would. You know, so for me, the fact I've got a original issue Ahsoka on a U.S. card and I've got it on a Canadian card, and they're both high grade. They're both graded. You know, I haven't really tracked the prices on them, but in general, the prices for those graded and high grade, they're about double what an Ahsoka would go for ungraded. So they clearly have their value, and clearly high grade examples and authenticated and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a subset of those collectors, just like with vintage Kenner rare stuff. There's a subset of collectors that are always going to be willing to pay a high price for a high grade item, no matter what reissue has happened. So it just depends on the collector, though. I mean, it's clearly the population of those types of collectors are much smaller than the average vintage collection collector who is more than happy and probably ecstatic that Ahsoka got reissued, right? And you know, Hasbro does the right thing, right? That they're looking out for their shareholders, right? They have to make money for their shareholders, so it behooves them to re-release some of these very expensive TVC 1.0 figures, because the vast majority of collectors are going to rejoice about it, right? That they're going to want them. So,
well, I for one, because I missed out on the first wave of figures 1.0. So, from my point of view, I'm happy that Hasbro are re-releasing these figures that I've not managed to be able to get, because now I can get them at retail price. I would say, I mean, I have one figure, the Dengar VC 01. I have him on the original card, and he is in good condition, so I will be sending him off to get graded at some point. So I spent, I think it was 140, 150 on him, and I got him shipped over from America. So he's the most expensive figure that I have got in my collection. But now, knowing that certain figures are going to be released again, it's good for me, because then I'm holding back on having to jump in and get these figures, so I can then just wait until they come along. Now, when you're looking at people, figures like Slave Leia, you know damn well that she will never ever be re-released. So she will obviously be one that's going to hold her price.
Absolutely.
So, how many other figures do you think that Hasbro wouldn't re-release in the vintage collection?
That's a good question. I think that I think it boils down to either politics, like with the Slave Leia, right?
Yeah.
The politics of the current environment, it doesn't allow for that kind of Leia to be re-released, right? Whether it's Me Too or, you know, whatever you want to look at, it's too risky of a proposition for Hasbro's reputation to re-release that. And then you have the other side of the coin, which is basically just popularity. So the characters that are not popular, they'll never see a reissue. Like, do I think we'll ever see a reissue of Oddball, the pilot, which goes for about $100 to $125 now, you know, mint on card? Probably not. You know, no one really cares about it, right? It could happen, sure. You know, like the young Anakin figure got re-released, or whoever it was, and so there's clearly some characters that get reissued that maybe aren't very popular, like Queen Amidala in like her full regalia. That was reissued, and everyone's like, why are you reissuing this? Nobody wants it, right? So it could happen, but in general, I think it just comes down to popularity. And for me, it'd be someone like Jango Fett or Star Killer, as obviously in the works. You know, some of those really popular characters that go for big money for the original issue. I'd probably stay away from them if I'm a collector right now. I wouldn't buy those because they're probably going to get reissued at some point. General
Yeah.
Grievous is another one. I would be shocked if they don't reissue General Grievous. But it is a big character and it's a complicated character. It's probably an expensive character to remanufacture. So maybe they don't want to fool with it, right? He's got so many limbs and he's got a cloth goods cape and the bubble is gigantic. It takes up half the card. So maybe Hasbro doesn't want to deal with that and maybe he never gets reissued. But just some of those characters, I think that are just kind of secondary characters, like the ATRT driver, that green kind of Clone Wars are. So like those are very expensive figures that just may not see a second release and probably won't. So those will probably hold their value pretty well. But I would be very hesitant to be buying some of those early, really, really expensive ones right now. And I certainly haven't done that in a while.
No. Like I say, Dengar was the only one that I did get. I mean, I've managed to get a few of the re-releases for the first wave. So, moving on to the next question: what is your most treasured part of your collection? So, if you had to get out in a hurry, is apart from your wife,
I've got one. I've only got one.
Wife? Oh, okay. You've only got one.
Yep, and it's not a valuable one. It's so this was given to me by my son. And it's a Star Wars: The Power of the Force Stap and Battle Droid. This is like a $5 item, right?
Oh, look at that! Yes,
not valuable at all. But my son gave it to me, and I keep it, where I can see it each day. And it was a gift on my first year of sobriety. The first, I made it a whole year without, kind of messing up, and my life was starting to get back in order. And my family gave that to me as a gift. And it's like a $5 item, but the rest of the stuff, and I say this in all seriousness, the rest of this stuff is just stuff. It's all toys. It's all just plastic dolls. And for me, none of it's really, life changing or life altering. And that would probably be the only, if my house was burning down, that'd probably be the only item I'd really care about. The rest of it's all insured. And that's kind of how I look at my life. It's all, I don't take myself too seriously. If anybody who watches my channel should know by now that I don't take myself too seriously, because that's all it is. It's all just dolls. And I think that my only negative about the toy collecting community is when they take this stuff way too seriously. Too seriously.
There are a lot of dramas, and I tend to try and stay well clear of that. I don't.
Me too.
It's I've seen some dramas, and I'm just like, whoa, I'm not getting involved in that. I stay away from it. But that Stap, that's the preview one, isn't it?
Yes, it's not an expensive item, but it has a lot of sentimental value. And my Optimus Prime that my grandfather gave me, it's not at my house, actually. It's at my office for decoration. But obviously, if that one was here, that would probably be up there on the list too, just given my grandfather's no longer with me. And he worked really hard to find that for me when I was a child for Christmas, driving everywhere. So those are the two most sentimental items in my collection.
Oh, that's brilliant, fantastic. So moving on to the next question then, what gives you that collecting buzz? I normally say toy collecting, but you are a collector of comics and trading cards. So what gives you that collecting buzz?
I'm like Indiana Jones. I am the acquirer of rare antiquities, right? So I like to find the weird and the wacky and the rare. That's where I really get a collecting buzz from. And I've got a few items like that. Some of the bootlegs in my collection, they might be one of two, one of three in the world type thing. That's fun. It's fun to be able to kind of find one of those and then send it off to be graded and authenticated, and then display it on the channel and say, hey, look, you're looking at one of maybe three in the world that exists right now. That kind of stuff's fun. It's not for bragging rights. It's not for showing how clever I think I am. It's just a fun challenge. That's really all it boils down to, is finding some of the stuff that other people haven't been able to find. So that's part of it. Part of it is seeing how high of a grade I can get. I get a pretty big buzz from anytime I send something in, and then the grade comes back surprisingly high. I get a buzz from that. That's the short answer for my collection.
Oh, awesome. Right, last question then. What does your collection mean to you?
My collection, that's a good question, by the way. And I've really enjoyed this talk, and you have some great questions. You're much better at this, Stu, than I am. When I do a live stream, I'm like, I'm like all over the place. I change directions left and right, but you're really good about steering the ship. So I applaud
Thank
you on
you.
that.
Appreciate that.
Um,
Thank you.
my collection means to me, it is an outlet for keeping me productive, a productive member of society. Because there was a time in my life where I was not a healthy individual, and quite honestly, I'm 45 years old now. I probably wouldn't be alive today if I hadn't decided to turn my life around and get sober. So I look at my collecting, I look at the stupid channel that I run, I look at my interaction with the toy community as a productive outlet for keeping me out of trouble and trying to help others in the community, whatever they're collecting. I get probably, I'd say 40 to 50 private messages a day with questions easily. And I try to get to all of them to the best I can. Sometimes I miss them, or sometimes I'm just too busy. But I get questions from people saying, "Hey, can you help me with this? What's this worth? Is this legit? Is this a fake? What do you think about this? Is this worth picking up?" I get literally, dozens and dozens and dozens of those every day, and to the extent I can help people make good purchase decisions and expand their collections in a budget friendly way, then that makes me happy. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Listen, it's come to the top of the hour. I have to say, I've listening to you. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've loved every minute of it, and in a way, it has been quite moving because I've not out of ignorance, but I really didn't know the situation that you've been in previously. All I can say is you are a very highly respected member of the tour community. You've got my utmost respect for sure. Like I say, really appreciate you being on the channel. Thank you for taking the time out to do this. Where can people find you? What are your social media platforms? Because I will be putting links to those on the description below.
Okay, well, Stu, first of all, thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun. I always enjoy these types of things. I do feel uncomfortable talking about myself. Okay, so this is a little outside the box for me. I don't like to talk about myself. So it was fun though, and it's fun to kind of do a retrospective, so to speak. But my Instagram is at Action Figure Grader. Twitter is at AFG on YouTube, and then my channel is just YouTube/Action Figure Grader. So
okay, so I will get those links, and I will, like I say, put them on the description below. If you haven't seen John's channel, highly recommended. He is a fountain of knowledge when it comes to certain things, especially graded figures and stuff on eBay. So highly entertaining, good value. John, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, mate. Unfortunately, that's come to the end of the hour. That's come to the end of the interview. So all I've got left to say is thank you guys for watching, and we shall see you in the next video. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thanks for everyone for watching. Thanks again.